Buenos dias. I'm Jason Marzek, Director of the Atlantic Council's Adrian Arch Latin America Center, and I'm delighted to welcome the President of Costa Rica, Carlos Alvarado Quesada, to today's discussion as part of our Leaders of the Americas series, where we spotlight the most prominent leaders in the Americas and provide firsthand insight and analysis on opportunities, developments, and trends. Bienvenido, Señor Presidente. I would also like to recognize and salute Costa Rican Ambassador to the United States, Fernando Yorca, who is a great partner of the Center. Welcome, Ambassador. And also acknowledge Adrian Arsht, the Atlantic Council Executive Vice Chair, and of course, founder of the Adrian Arsht Latin America Center, as well as the Adrian Arsht Rockefeller Foundation Resilience Center. As all of you know, Adrian is a true visionary whose passion for the region makes our work possible. Thank you so much, Adrian. Mr. President, at a time when the neighborhood is in the midst of many challenges, Costa Rica continues to be a beacon of democratic stability, democratic transit tradition, and also an attractive destination for tourists and investors. The COVID pandemic has, of course, affected Costa Rica's economy, which is highly dependent on tourism, yet the country's prompt and also say holistic response to the health crisis via its universal health system has received international accolades. The better news is that as of today, all of the country's international borders are open, even to American citizens. Costa Rica was recently included in Bloomberg's list of places to go in 2021, citing the country's ecotourism and also the government's carbon footprint calculator released at the end of last year to encourage tourism offsets. So I encourage everybody watching today, please go ahead and book your flights to Costa Rica. Our discussion also comes as an important inflection moment for Central America overall, which has been grappling with the effects of the COVID pandemic, two historic back-to-back hurricanes, and also increasing surges in authorized migration from the Northern Triangle to the US border. The Adrian Arch Latin America Center, we have a robust Central America program which seeks to set the foundation for a long-term bipartisan partnership plan to advance a more solid socioeconomic trajectory for the region, including finding solutions to longstanding challenges in Central America. Just last Wednesday, we released an issue brief on the role of the private sector in catalyzing inclusive economic opportunities in the Northern Triangle. And conversations like today's with regional leaders like President Alvarado Quesada are a key part of that work. Our 30-minute conversation today with President Alvarado will focus on a number of topics, including Costa Rica's post-COVID reactivation plan, and also how Costa Rica and the United States can work together to take on broader regional challenges around migration and climate change. President Alvarado is the youngest person to serve as president of Costa Rica in the last century, coming up now on 3 years in office as of next month. And even among the COVID challenges, President Alvarado has continued to advance Costa Rica's environmental and sustainability leadership, with the president of the COP26 visiting Costa Rica just recently to see firsthand a number of sustainability projects. The president is also a journalist and a political scientist by training and has written award-winning novels and anthologies. With that, I'm going to hand over to Maria Fernanda Bosmoski, the Deputy Director for Programs, and also a proud Costa Rican who will moderate the conversation with President Alvarado. Over to you, Maria Fernanda.
Thank you, Jason. President Alvarado, buenos dias. We are so honored that you are virtually here with us today. To all of you who are watching across our different platforms, thank you for joining us too. I want to remind you that today's conversation is on the record, and I want to encourage you to engage with us, either using the Zoom chat on Facebook or using our hashtag ACLeaders. If we have time, we may include your questions or comments in the conversation. So, whether it's morning, evening, or afternoon, night, wherever you are joining us from, I want to invite you to sit back, relax, enjoy the conversation, hopefully with a cup of Costa Rican coffee. President Alvarado, let's jump right in. The United States, we know, is one of the most important trade partners for the countries across the region. However, trade flows with the region fell 20% last year. The harsh economic consequences of the COVID-19 pandemic will likely lead countries to even higher levels of unemployment, larger debt, fiscal pressures, and social tensions. I have two questions for you. One, What does Costa Rica's post-economic reactivation plan look like? And two, do you think it's time to update the CAFTA-DR agreement and make it work better for Central American integration and prosperity?
Thank you, Maria Fernanda, and thank you all, particularly to Madam Adrian. And it's a thrill to be in this conversation with you all. Well, on the first hand, I believe that for the economic recovery to happen, the most important thing is to have the pandemic under control. That's why vaccination is it's key, and we are working very hard to keep the pandemic under control. One of the key things that we have managed to do is not to reach the saturation level of our hospitals. That means that no Costa Rican has been left behind in terms of treatment, whether they need hospitalization or a special unit for their to be care of. So that's very important. Also, that has helped us to keep part of our economic system ongoing. We have not used a strategy of lockdowns. We have never gone to absolute lockdown. We have enforced a strategy called Costa Rica works and takes care of itself. And that's how we managed to try to keep the economy open while keeping the pandemic under control. For example, in terms of tourism, which is the area the most hit by the pandemic, last year the tourism sector decreased by minus 40%, 40, and the whole of our economy decreased by a minus 4.5. So the key driver of the reduction of our economy was tourism. If you look at our exports last year increased, and then I will talk about the CAFTA question, but our exports actually increased last year, and foreign investment has been coming by our nearshoring strategy. So the key sector now it's on tourism, which is also driving unemployment, and we are currently fixing some of the structural problems that keep our unemployment high. So to give you some numbers, this year so far we have had 20% of the tourism we used to have in 2019, for example. Seems very low. But if you compare it to other countries, they are showing figures of 5% or 4%. So our strategy, even though we are not at the level of 2019, it's delivering some of the results that we expect to see as vaccination goes further, not only in Costa Rica, but for example, in the United States. By the strategy uh, pushed by the Biden administration, we also expect that have a more protected U.S. citizens so they can come to Costa Rica and visit in tourism, and we can provide also tourists with the care or the protection they need in a protect their environment from COVID-19. And in terms of CAFTA, as I mentioned, even though the pandemic, our exports were strong last year because we managed to keep moving the economy. We did not close, for example, the free trade zones, the zona francas, which are mainly of U.S. investment. So they kept on with the workings, particularly medical devices, the global services, for example, uh, components, electric components. So in terms of CAFTA, it has been growing for a 4% yearly till last year, but it remains strong. What I want to point out about CAFTA DR is actually its name. If you think about it, when it was created, CAFTA, it was created with a vision of the whole Central American region. It's the whole Central American and Dominican Republic trade agreement with the United States. And from the scale of Central America, I do believe that the strategy at the time by the US was thinking of enforcing more democracy, more economic flows. So I believe there are lessons that we can take from that strategy of more than a decade ago to what's going on now, what's happening now in the region.
Thank you, Mr. President. To quickly follow up on what you were just saying, last month the IMF approved a 3-year, almost $2 billion loan to help stabilize Costa Rica's economy. Can you go into details on how this IMF loan will help achieve the country's post-pandemic goals?
Well, particularly the most relevant part of the agreement is I will synthesize this in two main topics. One is the concrete goal that by 2023 Costa Rica will have a primary surplus in its national accounts, and that means stability. That means fixing the fundamentals of our economy, something that had not happened for the last 2 decades. And we started enforcing in 2018, but because of the pandemic, we had a setback, obviously, because of the decrease of the economy and the increase of expenditure to tackle the COVID pandemic. So one of the goals is to have this adjustment to have a primary surplus by 2023. And the second objective is having the, let's call it the kind of the certificate of the trust that having an agreement with the fund provides to private investors, to markets, that we are going in the right direction. Actually, the agreement we achieve is mainly based on reducing public expenditure. There are some new taxes, but they are very progressive taxes. And at the same time, we are not enforcing any privatizations that are going to affect our social model. Actually, it's morely based on stabilizing how the public salaries are increased or changing the system of our public servant sector. But the main goals are those: achieve primary surplus by 2023. It means healthy economics, and also having the respaldo, having the backing of the IMF to provide the confidence to the markets that we can go further into that. And having economic stability will also be the first step to having an activation of the whole economy. You cannot have activation of the economy if you don't have certainty of economical stability.
Thank you, Mr. President. I really wanted to ask you that as this week the IMF and World Bank spring meetings kick off. Let's shift gears here and talk about the environment. As a Costa Rican myself, I love it when people say, Costa Rica, you guys really care about the environment. And people are so excited when they talk about Costa Rica. Not long ago, Costa Rica was named the UN Champion of Earth in recognition of the country's leading global efforts to achieve a net zero emissions economy. And Costa Rica has been leading environmental protection efforts in areas of decarbonization, resilience, and protection of biodiversity. President Alvarado, how can Costa Rica build on its leading role in climate action ahead of the COP26 and enable other countries to follow suit?
Well, our approach to the climate crisis is based on our legacy because the country started environmental policies decades ago with the national parks, with the payment for environmental services. We managed to reverse deforestation from 20% coverage of forest in 1980 currently to more than 50% of coverage. So it's a legacy that we have, and we have to build on that. Secondly, our leadership is based on example, not necessarily on preaching. We preach by example, by getting things done in terms of environment. So we really supported the Paris Agreement. Cristiana Figueres was a Costa Rican that was chair on that, and key part. She played a key part on making that happen, and we have been kept true to that. We kept true to our promise to become a laboratory for decarbonization. And in 2019, in February, we were the first country to launch a decarbonization plan with 10 pillars throughout the whole economy and society to decarbonize our country, but at the same time to drive growth across the board. Actually, a recent study by the Inter-American Development Bank mentions that uh, decarbonization by 2050 can deliver up to $45,000 million on benefits, uh, taking out the investment necessary to achieve that. Uh, so it means it not only is good for environment, for health, but also is good to drive economy. And we're doing that, for example, on electrifying transport. We have a electric grid which is 99.5 clean and renewable, so we can drive electric mobility now without having have been 100% clean and renewable from its source. Also changing agriculture. Costa Rica had the first NAMA, which is the National and Adaptation Mitigation Facilities, and we have it on 2015 on coffee. Now we're working on plantain, bananas, rice, sugarcane, and livestock. Also in industry, changing bunker that is used in industries to electricity, for example. And we this year launched our all that has to do with changing the view or the paradigm of the garbage or trash into a more circular economy. And this year, we are also be leading a ambitious plan to expanding the protection of the oceans. Costa Rica is 92% of its territory is actually ocean. So if we protect 30% of our ocean, we'll be protecting an area that's equivalent to the Costa Rican land territory. This is part of the high ambition coalition that we lead with France and with the UK in the goal of the 2030 that every country has to protect 30% of its land and 30% of its oceans, given that scientists have pointed out that that's one of the key measures to protect ecosystems and human life on the planet. So this year we're going to move that and also do what we know how to do, that's lead with example, and we're going to achieve that by the end of this year.
Thank you, President. Once again, shifting gears and shifting topics, under your administration, Costa Rica created a special asylum category for Venezuelans, Nicaraguans, and Cubans. The Biden administration in the United States now has also designated Venezuela for TPS, and they have also prioritized addressing the root causes of migration more broadly pertaining to the Northern Triangle countries. My question to you is, how can Costa Rica, the United States, and the international community, including multilaterals like the IDB, work together to address the root causes of Central American migration to the United States?
Well, that's a great question. I think it's one of the key issues now. First, I want to point out that, let's put it this way, migration is like a fever. Migration is it's like a fever because fever it's what your body has when it has a another problem. It's how the body reacts to protect itself by producing fever. But it's not the root cause, it's the manifestation, it's the consequence. So I believe we are addressing more the fever than the root cause. And this has happened not I mean this is not last year or this year. This has been going for a couple of at least a decade or so. Having been also minister in my country and president, I have witnessed how even through Panama, Costa Rica, and the whole of Central America, we are like a thermometer of that fever. Why? Because we can see through our borders how people from various countries across the globe cross by foot our territories looking for the United States. And it is happened with citizens from Cuba, from Haiti. Whenever you have a conflict, wherever in the world, You can call it Congo. You can call it sometimes from Pakistan. You can see the numbers of people crossing to go to the United States. So that's one first key. It's not only the what's so-called the North Triangle that I will also like to address that idea. But we are a thermometer of that fever. So whenever there are root causes, someplace in the world, we can see it happening in manifestation of migrations. Secondly, I believe and I like to challenge the idea of what's been used as the North Triangle. Let's go back to the CAFTA example, CAFTA DR. CAFTA DR, it's a let's call it a more comprehensive policy of commerce, but also looking for human development. If you look also to the what was before CAFTA, it was the Caribbean Basin, la iniciativa de la Cuenca del Caribe, the initiative of the Caribbean Basin, which was designed to develop actually the region with some benefits, commercial benefits. Um, so I do believe that that's kind of a more comprehensive policy. We need to enforce not only thinking of what's called the North Triangle, because only talking about North Triangle, it's overseeing the regional history of Central America and its integration process. It's more abroad, it's broader than that. Um, it wouldn't make sense, for example, to have a North Triangle trade agreement only. So similarly, if we were talking about development, tackling poverty, tackling climate change, for example, which is on the root of what's happening, we need a more comprehensive policy. Climate change is one of the key drivers. For example, June 1st till November the 30, it's the hurricane season here in the Caribbean. We don't know what's going to happen during that. It's impossible to predict. But what scientists have said is that hurricanes have become stronger, and rains also have become stronger. And that we don't know where it's going to hit, if it's going to hit the land, and that affects employment, that affects agriculture, human safety, that drives many complexities as the rule of gangs sometimes, gender violence. So it's more than just the fever of migration. We need to work together on that. It's not a simple problem. It's not, but what I like to challenge as an idea conceptually, it's only thinking of the Northern Triangle and it's only thinking of terms of migration. Migration is the fever, as I mentioned. We need to move to the root causes of what's producing that. And it's not only on the so called North Triangle, it's across the board. We've seen that through Costa Rica.
Thank you, Mr. President. It may very well be time to challenge this paradigm and shift this paradigm, like you're saying. Unfortunately, all good things come to an end. President, we have run out of time. I hope that next time we do this, it's in person. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you so much for your insights. We'll follow up with you on this paradigm shift with the Northern Triangle. I want to also thank Domingo Saurni and Eva Lardizabal on the ALAC team. I want to thank the Costa Rica Embassy in Washington. They've been great partners and allies, not only for this event, but more generally. Thank you so much to Jason Marsek for his continued leadership of the Latin America Center team. And of course, Adrienne Arsht for her support, her vision, and just her excitement for the work that we do on a day-to-day basis. Thank you so much to everyone who's joined.
Thank you very much.